Who is going to win promotion from League One this season? Birmingham City obviously threatening to be the side, had threatened to be the side that pulls away, and possibly that's still the case. But at the moment, it's Wycombe Wanderers who lead the third tier. But a really exciting playoff scramble, as you would expect, with lots of teams down to around 13th, all in the mix at this stage. Plenty of times for things to change in November. So yeah, who's going to make the top six? Who's going to make the top two? And who's going to be playing Championship football next season? Plenty to discuss then on this League One podcast. Yes, welcome along to this League One podcast here on EFL Debate. And if you could give us a subscribe on YouTube and on Spotify, that would help us out a lot. For now, delighted to be joined by my co-host, Jack Ward from the Jack Ward Football Podcast and T-Lop. Jack, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time. How do you assess the League One promotion race at the moment?
Yeah, it's exciting, isn't it? I think I've heard it through Jake, which is it's a dangerous perception, I think, sometimes as a Lincoln fan himself. But it's been really, really good. Obviously, not following it as close as it was last season. Obviously, at the right end of it, with Oxford United managing to get promoted. But it's really, really exciting. And I think it's another example of an unpredictable campaign where Birmingham were the team that everybody thought would be in pole position for the majority of the season. Let's be honest, I think everybody thought Birmingham would be the team to beat. But Wycombe have been fantastic, and I've been so impressed by them. The work they've done over the summer, they recruited really well. It took time. I remember saying when Bloomfield came in, there was going to be growing pains. There was going to be growing pains from the Ainsworth era. There was going to be that adjustment period because of how long Ainsworth was in charge there. But when Bloomfield came in and I think ripped things up, the culture was similar, but the style of playing identity was so different. It was going to take time. And look, they're now seeing the fruits of that because they look like a really, really good squad. The metrics look really exciting. The goal metrics and the defensive numbers are really, really strong. The top of the table look in fantastic shape. And you look at that playoff race, it's really, really close. Peterborough down in 12th, but only 3 points away from Stockport in 6th. It's another example of similar to last season, but even more season before that. I think last year was a little bit, slightly different. Before we've seen so many teams in the race, and that's exactly the same. So yeah, a few leaders at the top end, but even down to the middle of League One, there's still plenty of clubs looking to sort of push into that top six, that competitive top six once again in League One.
Certainly is. Well, in terms of the top six, one in inhabitant, is that a word? Is Wrexham, who currently sit just outside the top two in third spot. Delighted to be joined by Wrexham fan Matthew from the Racecourse Ramble. Good evening to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
I'm surprised you've had me back.
No, we loved your input last time. So thanks so much for returning. How are you feeling about Wrexham? And I think you were quite measured from your point of view coming into the league. Has the start to the season kind of increased your optimism for what's possible?
It did a little. It has. But I think from time to time, you just have to rein yourself in, don't you? So, when you start so well, then you do get a little bit excited, fully knowing or expecting really Birmingham still to win it, in all honesty, by the end of it. So, no, I'd still measured, still not trying to get too excited or carried away. Just happy to be here, to be honest, still. We went to Charlton, stood in the ground at the Valley, looked around and still couldn't believe we were here, sort of thing, or back where we feel we belong, you see. So yeah, not getting too carried away, Gab.
You're obviously missing goalkeeper Arthur Okonkwo for the next 6 weeks or so due to injury. I mean, that's got to be a big loss, hasn't it?
He's such a good shot, as you know. He's such a good shot stopper. There is elements of his game that are still not perfect. He's young, remember, but that will be a loss because he's just a stupendous shot stopper. And we haven't obviously seen too much of Callum Burton. You would know more probably than me because obviously you've seen him from his Plymouth days. So we'll be learning as we go along. But his pedigree of Burton is good, obviously, isn't it? So we're kind of taking solace in that at the moment.
Yeah, I've obviously not an expert on Callum Burton because I think at some of the clubs that he's played for, he's often found himself as the number two rather than the number one. So that's made it difficult to get a real steer for where he's at. And I suppose that's the case again at Wrexham, isn't it?
Yeah.
So he'll be wanting to kind of buck that trend, I suppose. So good luck to him, and hopefully he can make the most of his opportunity. Jack, have you been impressed with Wrexham so far this season?
I have been. I think it's again. I'm looking at the numbers, the number side of it more than anything as well. Like, again, we knew them when Wrexham came into the division. It was about them being as strong as they could be at the back. It's been the case in League Two. It's been in the case in this phenomenal rise over the last couple of years with Phil Parkinson in charge. It's about being really, really strong defensively and building that base. Again, they're joint for clean sheets in the division, so clearly that's working a treat. But it's, building from the back in a defensive structure that's been really, really good. And yeah, they're a very, very tough team to break down. That they're not the most free flowing. I don't think anybody can really argue that isn't really what their intention is. They don't want to be that. That isn't the identity. It hasn't ever been that. Sometimes it's not always easy on the eye, but what it is, it's a very, very well structured base with a very, very direct approach that can lead to teams struggling and struggling to deal with how they look to approach games. But we knew if Wrexham were going to have a good chance of succeeding in League One, whatever success looked like, it was about continuing on that trend of being defensively strong and then trying to sort of pose threats in that more direct manner. And again, Wrexham have done that. I've been really impressed by them.
Who else then, Matthew, would you say have been Wrexham's key players so far this season?
I think Ryan Barnett has been... Yeah. You could make a case. It's early. I know it's early, but sort of if you were to have an award for player of the season so far, I know that sounds a bit daft. Ryan Barnett would be right up there, I think. Yeah. From an attacking point of view, we're getting a little bit worried because there's whispers that Rangers might be looking at him now as they sort of look for value. It would appear that is what they're hunting. Is what I am reading. So Ryan Barnett probably from an attacking point of view. I might have mentioned Dobson last time. I can't remember if I did or not. Maybe not in this capacity. But George Dobson breaking up the play for us because obviously we lost George Evans to injury. We've got horrendous injuries at the moment. George Dobson has been outstanding from that point of view. And then just a quick mention probably for Max Cleworth at the back because he started to chip in with the goals. So, we've got obviously our top goal scorer was Jack Marriott, who went down injured with a long-term injury. Mullin hasn't really got going from his spinal surgery. So we're relying on other people chipping in. So Max has stepped up to that.
Yeah, do you know, it's such an interesting point in that, Matthew, that you raised, because I think when Wrexham first came up, even to League Two, never mind League One, I was expecting Jacob Mendy to make more of an impression in the EFL than Ryan Barnett. And I was expecting Max Cleworth to go out on loan and to possibly even be offloaded if you made the step up to League One. So I'm actually a little bit surprised by how well those two players have made the trajectory. And I suppose, lots of outsiders associate Wrexham with the spending power. And of course, you have been lucky enough to sort of benefit from that. But there is a developmental component here at play as well, isn't there?
Yeah, to be fair to Ryan Barnett, he was bought as a winger, and we've transitioned him into this wing back. And I think that's been the most impressive thing from his point of view, is that he's just got his head down, seemingly not moaned about it. So, got on with it and turned into a really, really good wing back who will do his defensive work, but obviously his best work is done going forward, obviously. But yeah, obviously. With this summer, we were all a bit worried because the names we were getting linked with were fairly, we call them, is it nicer to say experienced than older? There was lots of names being mentioned. But yet we brought in the likes of Brunt, obviously kept Okonkwo, Cleworth, kept sort of pretty much sort of kept his place, got back in early. Barnett's young. So obviously Mo Fowles come in, not play too much. So yeah, it's not perhaps been what we had done before. There was a slightly different element to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose in terms of creativity, you're very reliant on those wing backs getting high and wide. Ryan Barnett, and you mentioned James McLean earlier. I suppose if you're looking for creativity centrally, we know George Dobson's pretty much going to sit in front of the defence.
Yeah.
I think Andy Cannon is a dynamic enough midfielder, but I don't know that I would necessarily describe him as super creative. So there is, I guess, quite a big reliance on Elliot Lee in that sort of advanced role.
Yeah, over reliance, if you ask me, Gab, because last year we ran him into the ground pretty much. He was one of the only players that we didn't have a natural rotation option for him, so he kind of had to play every week. And in the end, he carried us early in the season when Mullin was out, and then at the end of the season, you could tell he was running on gas. And we didn't really. I don't think we've really solved that problem. I class Cannon as box to box. That's how I would see him. And we brought Ollie Rathbone in, obviously from Rotherham.
Full of running, isn't he, Ollie Rathbone?
But he's similar to Cannon. I think he's box to box. He's not got that. It's not that he can't do it. He can't do it regularly, that creative element. So I'm not sure we fixed that problem. So when Elliot Lee is off the ball, then you've got two box-to-box players playing then. And I still think it's a problem at some point we've got to solve, whether it's in January or in the summer. We did bring in young Josh Adam from Man City, but I think he's too raw yet. He played last night, played on Tuesday night in the Cup, but didn't really have much impact. So I think it's a problem we need to solve.
Yeah, well, hopefully you can do that. Just finally, before I let you go, Matthew, do you think Wrexham will finish in the top 6 this season?
I can't go back on what I predicted at the start of the season, can I? You know when everybody does their predictions, and I predicted that we would miss out, Gab, because for two reasons. You don't want to be the cocksure one that sort of says, "Oh, Wrexham are just gonna, we're just gonna go straight to the playoffs." But also, I just thought it was disrespectful to the seasoned teams that were already in this league, Gab, and so I think I think we'll just miss out in the end. That's my honest opinion. But obviously, if we go out in January and spend a silly amount of money or something like that, that could change the field. But no, I think we'll fall short currently.
Yeah, certainly a top 10 side and looking trending upwards. Matthew, thanks so much for joining us, and look forward to linking up with you later in the season.
You're welcome, Gab. Thanks very much.
Cheers.
Thanks, Jack.
Delighted to be joined today by Claire from the Hatters Hangout. Good evening, Claire. Thanks so much for making time for us this evening. Just wondering how you're feeling about the Stockport County season, especially after responding to a heavy defeat with that 5-0 thumping of Bolton Wanderers.
There's one thing you can say, it's never boring. I think the 5-0 loss was a massive shock. I expected to get beat, if I'm being honest, because Wycombe are just on fire. But I definitely didn't expect a 5-0. And similarly, I didn't expect a 5-0 on Saturday either. But yeah, like I say, never boring. I was very, very happy with our ability to bounce back.
Absolutely. Jack, I wanted to ask you about Louis Barry. Is he somebody who, from the outside, you're very excited about the future of and keeping a close eye on?
Yeah, I think when you think Stockport this season, you think Louis Barry, and that's because he's been sublime. In the games that they've won, he's been phenomenal. The numbers are a joke. I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to the numbers, but they are absolutely phenomenal. The baseline numbers, 10 goals from 15 games is a pretty good return, isn't it? But you're looking at a player that stepped up. He stepped up. He was an important part of Stockport before, and he's continuing to be a really, really important part of them in League One. And I think Louis Barry's had a really strange career. I think if you look at his time, he's really struggled to settle. He's really, really struggled to sort of find a home and find a place where he can show his true ability. But at Stockport, that seems to be the place, because the return, his general contribution beyond the goals is really, really good. He's dynamic. He's, again, I look at the finishing numbers are great, but even the creative numbers aren't bad whatsoever either. He's an all-round forward this season that's ripping League One apart. So yeah, if Stockport don't get promoted, first time of asking, I imagine at 21 years of age, there's going to be plenty of suitors from the league above. So if I'm legally, I'd lock him in a cage in January, because there's going to be some. There's going to be some championship teams, I think, sniffing around him, because he looks in a really, really good place and top form, really, really good current form.
Yeah, and to be honest, a lot of our fan base have been a bit frustrated with him this season because although he is producing those numbers in a lot of games, people feel like he's struggling, and there's more teams that are becoming used to what he does. Now, his numbers speak for themselves, and I've not got a bad word to say about him. And I think I'm probably a bit of a stuck record. And now, as someone who is a mum, he's the kind of player that I want my little girl to grow up loving, because it doesn't matter what's happening. Louis Barry has a smile on his face when he plays football. He's just genuinely happy to be there on the pitch. And Jack's really right. Like, his loan spells haven't been that successful at other clubs. And you know what? I think sometimes you find a team that just works. And it seemed last season that was us for him. And he was really keen on coming back if he wasn't going to get in Villa's team. And, none of us are ignorant to the fact that Villa could recall and sell him in January. We just have to hope that doesn't happen.
Well, let's hope you are able to retain him. I would imagine in Aston Villa's shoes, you'd want to sort of maybe not rush things too much and make sure that you can experience the high stakes point of a season, because he didn't last year. He was sort of definitely inspired you to title in that 12-game winning streak, but he had a long-term injury for the second half of the season, which meant that he wasn't really around in the high stakes kind of moment. So I think I'd hope that you can kind of experience a bit of that this year. Claire, I know that you push for time, so I'll keep this one brief. Do you think Stockport County will finish in the top 6? Is my first question, and my second question is: are you more optimistic about your chances than you were before the start of the season?
God, this is a hard one, Gab. I don't think that we'll get in the top 6.
Okay.
And honestly, I'm really fine with that, because I think the upwards trajectory that we're on anyway, like, it's going to happen at some point. And there is a risk, if we continue to go at the rate that we are, that we're growing a bit too fast for ourselves. I think that it wouldn't be a bad thing to have a bit of a stable season where we don't struggle, but we're up there, and just enjoy it. Like, we've got a very, very good manager who's not been in this league before, and he's learning as we go as well. So I'm fine with us not finishing in the top 6, and I genuinely didn't think that we would before the season started. But to answer your question, I probably have a little bit more confidence in our ability to do it at this point than I did before the season started. So if it happens, then obviously I'm not going to be disappointed. But if it didn't, I wouldn't be disappointed either. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, certainly a club on the right track. Claire, thanks so much for making time for us this evening, and hopefully catch up with you later in the season.
Yeah, you take care. Thanks for having me.
Top stuff. Thanks, Claire. Delighted to be joined now. We will be joined shortly by Dan Finch, who's a Charlton Athletic fan. But for now, we're joined by James Richings from the Bucks Free Press, the Wycombe Wanderers dedicated journalist. Good evening, James. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you, Gab. Thank you for having me on. And hello to you, Jack. How are you doing? Okay, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, James. I remember last time I think I've been on a few shows with James, and I think I'm not going to see I think Wycombe, the conversation of Wycombe is going to be far different than it has been in the last couple of times. So I'm excited. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
James, what a job Matt Bloomfield is doing at Wycombe Wanderers. I think as much as the form so far this season is a victory for Matt Bloomfield, I also think it's a victory for maybe the previous ownership regime of Wycombe Wanderers, because there were definitely times when the results weren't everything, and I think you went through a winless run midway through last season, and I quite like the fact that the football club saw the bigger picture whilst being really ambitious and wanting to get to the Championship, and you've now got people like Dan Rice and the Georgian owner who've got the wherewithal to make that happen. But I think this is a victory for loyalty, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. I mean, when you look at the run that Wycombe went on last season, it was around about this time of the year. There were times where Wycombe played very, very well, but weren't winning. And then there were times where they were losing and they were dreadful. One of the games that always stands out in my mind is Morecambe in the FA Cup at home. it was absolutely atrocious. And it got to the end of December, and Wycombe are now looking over their shoulders at the drop zone when at the start of October, I think Wycombe, were fifth or sixth or
Well,
something.
you won 4-1 at Fleetwood or something like
Yes,
that.
yes.
I think it might have been late October, and then I think you went on this winless run. But I always felt during that winless run last season, there were definitely 3 or 4 home games where it was like, how have they not scored? How have they not won that? So I always felt like you were a bit better than the bottom sides. But the turnaround, and I think is it 4th in the form table in 2024, at one point, or from the second half of last season, and then you've kind of carried that on into this campaign.
Oh, I mean, when you look at the form table, Wycombe have picked up 72 points this calendar year from 37 games. And I think other than Sheffield United, Wycombe are the only team to have won 10 league games this season out of anyone in the 92 with the Blades. So the turnaround that Bloomfield has done has been nothing short of remarkable. And I think what really was key in that was the January transfer window. When you look at the players that Wycombe signed in the summer of last year, your Kean Breckens, your Richard Keoghs, Lyle Taylor joined in like November time, Harry Boys, Killian Phillips, all those players who were signed at the start of the season were gone in January. Like every single one. It was pretty much a new team. And you look at the players Wycombe signed in January. Bez Labala from Burton, he's been brilliant. Richard Kone has been absolutely phenomenal. And
What fine that was.
I mean, that's scouting for you. You know, that is proper scouting. And I think it's important to mention as well that Cody had trials at other teams as well. I mean, I remember he was at Colchester a few years ago, but Wycombe did what they needed to do. They signed him up, and he's been nothing short of a revelation. Franco Ravazzoli, the goalkeeper, played 1 game in the league for MK over 2 years. He was the reason why Wycombe won on Saturday against Wigan under the cosh for much of the second half, and he produced 2 fantastic saves in the last 10 minutes. And at the full time, all the players just ran up to him and congratulated him because he's the one who helped them get the win. So and even though he joined in September of last year, he didn't become the number 1 until around February, March. So the signings that Bloomfield has made since at the start of this year have been very, very key. And that, along with his system and along with the scouting system Wycombe have got, has played a huge role in their successes so far.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Jack, that just goes to show you. I mean, Wycombe Wanderers do seem to have this history of plucking players out of nowhere to initially to come into their B team, and then all of a sudden they can very quickly come into that starting 11. It shows, well, firstly, great recruitment, but also creating a really good culture.
And good coaching too. I think that's important. That they've got to be able to come in and be coached to reach the high ceiling that they clearly do have. That's really important. But the recruitment's such a good point. I think the word recruitment gets thrown around so much, doesn't it? But good recruitment is absolutely pivotal. And Wycombe this season are a prime example of that. They have gone out and bought players that I think a lot of people probably looked at the start of the season and went, that looks okay for a side maybe thinking about the top six. They're thinking about a side pushing on from 12th upwards. I mean, at the moment, those people are looking pretty silly because they're in a really, really strong place. And those players that have been looked at with not as much excitement, they definitely are now. So, yeah, it's difficult to follow up that summary from James because he's touched on most bases. But it's really, really exciting. And I come back to the point I said at the start of the show. It is a loyalty thing. It's a loyalty thing, and it's Wycombe believing in the manager that they appointed a little while ago. And they could have jumped so much earlier. Last season, there were some really, really tricky periods. Like Jim said, they were looking down more than up at one point. And at that point, they could have gone, maybe we took a bit of a gamble with Bloomfield. We went down the loyalty route, ironically, with him actually getting the job in the first place. Did we make a mistake? But actually, ironically, they've used loyalty in another way and kept hold of him and believed in the coach that he clearly out now is. It's a really, really exciting one that's now going to be very quickly, it's crazy out in League One, going to be linked to some top jobs. And I think that's already a bit of a concern, I imagine, among the Wycombe fan bases. As soon as a manager like Bloomfield playing a good brand of football and in such a strong position in the League One table, he's going to get looked at by teams in the division above. And that's also a sign of a team in a really good place and a manager coaching fantastic players at a good level. So yeah, I've been so impressed by them. Been so impressed by Wickham.
I mean, we've seen as well with Bloomfield allegedly being linked with Coventry in the last week or so. It's testament to what he's done at Wickham. It
Exactly.
really, really is. I mean, when you look at December of last year, that was when it was getting very, very iffy. And it was around the Christmas period where we had just lost away at Exeter. We conceded a very late goal. Exeter, I think, were below us in the table. And we missed a penalty in the last minute. And that was when even I personally thought, I don't know now. I genuinely don't know. Then we played away at Leyton Orient. Wickham played quite well, but we drew 0-0. And on the face of it, looking back, it was a good point because Leyton Orient were a very difficult side last season. And you're now thinking, okay, that's 12 consecutive games in the league without a win. What's going to happen now? Fast forward, 2 or 3 days later, it's New Year's Day. We played Bristol Rovers at home. We won 3-2, and that was the start of it. And that was when Wickham got rid of the deadwood, brought in the players who are still there now doing their thing. I think the only player that didn't stay was Nigel Longvike, who's obviously gone to Huddersfield. But the players that Wickham signed in January, albeit still there, and the recruitment they've made done in the summer has been brilliant. I mean, Dan Udo from Shrewsbury has been brilliant. He's been so good. Gideon Godwin.
That's a prime example of somebody a player that was brought in and everybody thought, yeah, it's a good addition. It's a good addition for a team that are probably looking to sneak into be comfortably in the top 10, maybe give Topsit a go. But again, that's good recruitment. Players that are being brought in to go, that's okay for that level. But actually, with good coaching and a great culture, can be taken to that step above that nobody can see. And that's why these managers and these scouts and these directors of football, technical directors and the hierarchy above are paid far more money than we are because they can see that talent and believe in what they can coach.
And I think it's important to mention about these times at Wickham now. These are times that they haven't really seen for a long, long time. To be bought out by a billionaire, and the way the club are moving forward is honestly it's brilliant to see because Wickham are in the process of getting an academy. They want to be up against the likes of Brentford and QPR, Premier League and Championship in terms of sorting out players. And these are really, really exciting times at Adams Park. And the football on top of that Matt Bloomfield has got Wickham playing, it's so good to watch. I mean, I know you were just talking about Stockport earlier. Stockport couldn't even get near us last week. And then they go and beat the team we lost the playoff final by the same scoreline on Saturday. And that isn't to say Bolton weren't very good. Wickham on that Tuesday night were absolutely brilliant. I mean, to be 3-0 up inside 20 minutes, I think they scored twice in like 50 seconds, I think, or something like that. I actually missed Fred's second goal because I was still reporting on the first goal. That's how quick it was. So these are really exciting times for Wickham. And long may it continue. And people say, a fish up a tree. That's the term I get heard a lot with Wickham. If you look in the face of it, Wickham have been very good. Only 4 defeats this season in all competitions, and the 2 league defeats Wickham had were in the top in the first 2 games against the 2 sides who are the favourites to go up in Wrexham and Birmingham. So Matt Bloomfield is due a lot of credit for the work that he's done this summer.
I think the $1 million question is, James, is again, it's a question that you probably have had or thought about. Is this a sustainable run? Is this a sustainable position to be in? Because I think there's a really good comment. I'm looking at the comments that are being written on X, and I do agree that this squad is a fantastic squad. It's not the biggest of squads, and we're coming into a quite tricky time in the season where it comes thick and fast, and the international breaks finish until March. We're currently at the final one before March. It's not a tiny squad, but it's smaller than the teams around them. It's much smaller than Birmingham, for example, who are second and are chasing your tail.
I mean, that's a valid point, and I completely understand that. But if you were to speak to the Wickham fans now, I mean, the squad depth that Wickham have got now it's incredible to think. For example, up top, when everyone is fit, you've got Sam Vokes, Brandon Hanlon, Richard Kone, Gareth McCleary. You could put Fred Onyedinma up front. You've got Dan Udo. It looks brilliant, and I've just seen that comment come through from about Aaron Morley. Aaron Morley has been so good for Wickham this season. It's a bit of a domino effect because he's now playing in the role that Josh Scowen has made his own. Now,
very different player, though, isn't he, James?
Very different.
For me, Aaron Morley as a technician, he's just glorious footballer. Yeah.
Well, he's now in like the Scowen sort of role, which has allowed Josh to go forward. And Wickham, they just look like a well-oiled machine. And obviously, you're going to get injuries. There are going to be a few hiccups along the way. We get that. It's a 46-game season. It's a season of 46 games. It's never going to be perfect. But at this moment, you really can't fault the Chairboys. They've done very, very well. And as that comment said, a load of Wickham players are going to be looked at in January. I know I don't want that to happen, but when you're doing so well, you're going to turn a few heads in the higher leagues, and we'll have a few.
We'll have a few. We'll have a few.
We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, just one more question for me, James. If you've got time, in terms of sort of managing expectation for Matt Bloomfield, I personally think he will stay at least until the end of the season, just because of that connection with the club. I don't think you leave that too readily. But I remember I go back to the 14-15 playoff final season, where you just avoided relegation on the final day the year before, and it was completely against the odds that Wycombe Wanderers were going for promotion that season. And it was almost like a running joke for me that every week you would Phil Catchpole would interview Gareth Ainsworth, and Gareth Ainsworth would say 50 points, 50 points. He'd probably be saying 50 points when they're on 51 points. So he's very, very keep feet on the ground kind of thing. Has Matt Bloomfield applied a similar kind of thing where, we're playing expectations down as much as possible? Has he learned that from the master, if you like?
I would say so. He hasn't set a specific points tally when he's spoken to us every week, but he always says, one game at a time. And the one phrase he always says is, "There's so much more that we can do. We can be better. We can be better." That's like the 50 points. What Gaz would say.
Yeah.
Bloomfield is, we can get better. There's so much more that we can do to improve. And I think that sort of attitude is what's helping Wycombe on top of everything else, because there will be something that Blooms isn't happy with. He will want that to be tweaked, and then that will just add more layers to Wycombe's game. We have mentioned about the fact how good Wycombe have been. I mean, if you were to look at it as a whole, they've had 21 games this season in all comps. They've won 15 of them. Let's just put it like that. They've lost 4 times, drawn twice. 3 of those defeats were in August, and their last defeat in all comps was against Villa in the Cup, which isn't that bad. I mean, that's how good Wycombe have been. And some might say, oh, well, they haven't played any of the big teams. They narrowly lost to Wrexham and Birmingham. They beat Rotherham, who were one of the favourites to go up. Stockport have been very good. They've beaten them, and Wycombe looked good. But Blooms is very much keeping a little things. He always says he doesn't want to get too ahead of himself, because he knows it's so early days. Only 3 months of the season has gone, and we have another 6 months left. I mean, anything can happen. I mean, next time we speak, Wycombe could be 8th for all we know, which I hope that isn't the case, but so much can happen. But I've said this to the Wycombe fans on the forums and stuff, just enjoy it. Just enjoy every moment. I mean, there's no game this week with the internationals. Next week, the week after, it's Lincoln away. Prior to the season, Wycombe had never won away at Wigan, and they hadn't won away at Stockport for a long, long time. I think Wycombe's last win at Lincoln was in 2011. And it's the year ago or 2 years ago, you think, oh, yeah, that's going to be a bit of a bogey round. But there's nothing to say Wycombe can't go up to Lincoln and get something, because they've been that good. So, just enjoy it while it lasts. I'm getting dizzy seeing Wycombe at the top of the table. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, I'll let you get away from the dizziness, because I know you've got a gym session this evening. So that wouldn't be ideal for the treadmill, would it? Thanks so much for joining us, James, and all the best, and look forward to catching up with you later in the season.
Thank you so much, chaps. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Take care, James. See you later.
Top man. Cheers, James. We'll be joined by Tim Stoodley from the Yellow Block podcast on PTB United shortly. For now, we've got Dan Finch, who's an addict. Dan, not quite as upbeat when it comes to Charlton Athletic as with Wycombe Wanderers. You've got some good defensive foundations this season, but going forward, you've found it hard to create chances consistently.
We just don't really have a midfield this season, which is a shame, because Nathan Jones came in and stopped the rot last season. And as you said, we've built a really strong foundation. See, Alex Mitchell came in. Will Mannion has been pretty good in goal. He's been a bit struggling recently. Obviously, Kane Ramsey was fantastic. We got him in from Harrogate. And Lloyd Jones missed a lot of last season. The back end has come in really good. He's injured at the minute, sadly. But the midfield, we're just struggling to create, as you said. And it's costing us quite a lot. We've had a lot of draws recently. And against some good sides, to be fair, we've come up against a lot of the top six, Barnsley, Wrexham, Stockport, Birmingham, and come out with good results. But I think Exeter on Saturday was the perfect example of a game where they ran the ball because we couldn't get the ball off them. And we had a couple of half chances, but just there's not a lot in the tank.
How does Nathan Jones troubleshoot those creative issues in January? Is it a case of recruiting good midfielders who can pass the ball?
I think it's a creative issue. I think really the last time we had someone in that role was probably Conor Gallagher / Joe Aribo back in the playoff year. So I don't think we ever really replaced him. I think we made a lot of signings in the summer in that midfield region who were industrious like midfielders like Doherty and Luke Berry and Alan Campbell. They get around the pitch, but we've not really seen them when we're on the ball. They haven't really done much, and that's caused a big problem. That the transition to our again good strikers on paper. Matty Godden's got quite a good return for this season so far. See, Miles Leaburn is back and has scored in, I think, both his Bristol Street Motors games. Chucks is injured again, but that's part and parcel that comes with Chucks and EK. So yeah, it's just I think if we can get a real creative midfielder in, there's a chance. But we're off it at the minute.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, Jack, what do you think about Charlton? Because I think a lot of people fancied them before the start of the season, but this creative issue, you're going to be very reliant at the moment on your fullbacks, I guess, given the lack of creativity in midfield. Although I do like Connor Coventry as a, I think they've got tidy footballers in there in Terry Taylor and Connor Coventry, but maybe not players who are really going to create something. So with that in mind, I suppose you're going to be reliant on your fullbacks. And at the moment, they're playing a centre half at right back in Zach Mitchell. So again, a little bit imbalanced. So I suppose for you as an outsider, Jack, how do you feel about Charlton? And have you gone off them a little bit since the start of the season?
Yeah, I was really excited about Charlton because I thought their recruitment was very Nathan Jones. And I think if you look at Nathan Jones as a manager, he makes you believe, doesn't he? I think that's the thing. He makes you believe. He speaks really, really well. And when you start then thinking that he's bringing in players that are going to get on board with that type of enthusiasm, naturally yourself, you do become enthusiastic about a football team that need to be back into the Championship as quickly as possible, but for a long, long time have really struggled to work out a way of getting there. So I was excited. I thought the recruitment was strong. However, the forward area has been a huge problem. 15th for big chances created, which again, for a side that are trying to get into the top six, is just way too low. You cannot be creating the 15th most chances created. Their XG conceded and their goals against isn't a concern at all. 15 goals against is actually one of the best. Defensively, it's not a problem. And last season, that was their biggest problem. I remember the Nathan Jones interview. He spoke about he called out the players in an interview and speaking quite openly about the issues defensively and the fact that the managers prior in that one season failed to keep a clean sheet in that back three, back four, back five that was tested across all different types of managers. That doesn't seem to be the issue now. And if you look at resolving problems, Nathan Jones looks like he's resolved that issue pretty well. But going forward, that's a bit of a concern. And I think you're right. They need a creator. They need a bit of a magician. They need somebody who can do things where you need that magic, that stardust. And that is not actually a Nathan Jones type of player, which was going to make recruitment slightly more difficult because trying to find somebody who can do the robust, dark art, hard mile, grueling side of the game, but also be the magician and be the stardust, the star, if you like, in that creative final third. I mean, what I've done there is just build the best ever footballer. So trying to recruit that is really, really tricky. But it's what they need because the metrics in the final third are far, far worse than they need to be in relation to the teams that are trying to push into that top six.
I think that's what he tried to do with Tyrese Campbell. Over the summer, he moved Tyrese Campbell from wide into a more kind of behind the striker role. And it just wasn't as effective as it was in pre-season. So I think he kind of bailed off that around the Birmingham game when we kind of switched formation to the diamond that we're in now. And the other problem we have is obviously, as you said, Nathan Jones's style is very kind of defence first, make sure we're not conceding. But we've got no pace in our team at all. And when we're trying to counter it, it's slow, it's methodical. The wing backs, as you said, Zach Mitchell's been playing right back, who's obviously a centre half. Spent last year at Colchester, but playing centre half. We've not got either of our right backs at the minute. And Josh Edwards kind of hurried back from an injury that he got, I think, the second week of the season. So, and he's not particularly quick. So I think the two probably quickest players we've got is Tyrese Campbell, who's playing a new position, and Gaheem Dixon, who we brought in from Jamaica, who no one really knows about. We've just seen him off the bench once. So
yeah,
it's about getting from. Sorry, guys. The counter-attacking point is really interesting because it's an idea. David Jones's ideology has been all about sort of getting from back to front as quickly as possible, and actually, in a way, again, I'm no tactical genius, but that actually almost.
Oh, don't do yourself a disservice, Jack.
No,
I've seen your analytics videos on Jack Ward. Football.
There's a reason why I'm sat here. But
there is a reason why you sat there.
It's going from. I guess it's going from back to front quickly, and that almost avoided a midfield problem in Nathan Jones's head. He's like, well, if we get the ball from back to front quickly, we don't really need that sort of number 10 working in the zones outside the penalty box too often. Because the idea is get out of our penalty box and get it in the other penalty box really, really quickly. But when you haven't got that settled front two and the two up there that can hold the ball up and work with each other, it's really, really important that those two strikers are in connection and aligned with each other in that strategy and in that plan. But you haven't had a settled front two. You haven't really had a settled back four. You initially started the season with a back five. Yeah. I mean, the issue you've currently got at the moment is you've got a lot of moving parts. And Nathan Jones's system has always been about consistency within what they do. And at the moment, there's a real lack of consistency in what they're doing. Something's in their control and something's out of their control. So it's tricky. I don't think it's all doom and gloom. There certainly are positives. But the issue you are, and again, Dan, I'm sure you said it the right way, you're Charlton, and Charlton fans are very, very quick to get extremely frustrated. So I can understand when things don't look as promising as they once did, even at the start of the season when the recruitment looked really, really strong. Nathan Jones will be fully aware that he needs to be careful and needs to be quite quick in the way that he gets fans not back on side, but gets fans believing again.
Yeah, I think Nathan Jones, the one good thing for Nathan Jones is he will get, I think, a bit of extra time from the average Charlton fan because of his connection to the club before. That seems to have done its job so far. Obviously, this time last year, there's a lot of Charlton fans trying to get Michael Appleton out the door.
Well, that's another thing I would ask. Can I ask you about that, Dan? Because that's a really interesting point that you've raised there. Nathan Jones is very much a bit of a passion merchant. He does bring a lot of attention upon himself, I think. Some fans absolutely adore that. You speak to other sets of fans, maybe like Southampton fans, and then maybe hasn't ingratiated himself as well. Do you think that Charlton fans are kind of on board with the way Nathan Jones leads? I think
so, yeah. But I think that's a lot to do with, I think that, as I said, because he's been with the club before, with a bit of a younger level, but I think that definitely helps that he came in with us and knowing who he is. I think he's one of those managers that when it's going well and he's your manager, you love him, don't you? But you don't want to see him on the opposition bench. But yeah, I think in majority the Charlton fans are behind him and are fine with that. I think when we've had that kind of passion before is when you could argue we've been at our best. So like Lee Bowyer was very similar. A lot of people didn't like him, but he had that attitude, that connection with the fans, for example. So I think it's there. It's a building block, isn't it? He's only been in charge really for about a year, maybe under a year. So it's still very early on. And if we can get the recruitment right in January, hopefully things will fall into place for him.
Creativity and width certainly needed in January. Just finally, because I'd like to bring in Tim Stoodley from the LA block in a moment. So just my final question for you, Dan. Do you think Charlton Athletic will finish in the top 10 this season?
Top 10? Yeah, I mean, before the summer, obviously, when we came on here to do the pre-season one, I said, I think we're looking at that kind of 7th to 10th range. I think that's where we'll end up finishing. I think we will improve. Yeah. And I think that's the kind of range. I'm not sure we're quite a playoff team. I think there's still enough. There's a few gaps that need to be sorted. But Miles is back. I think Miles and Matty Godden are finding a bit bit of chemistry. If we can get a bit of help for them, you never know. But I think that's the right range.
January holds the key to anything better than that, I think. Dan, thanks so much for joining us, and best luck for the rest of the season. I'm sure we'll link up again
Cheers,
soon.
Dan.
See you soon.
Delighted to be joined now by Tim Stoodley from the Yellow Block podcast. Thanks so much for waiting, Tim. Really appreciate your time bearing with us. Just wondering, it feels like a bit of a throwback to those classic late noughties Peterborough United sides at the moment, where you've got plenty of youth, a side that can threaten from all angles and has one or two real star individuals, but is very, very vulnerable at the back. And it feels like a bit of a revert to that this season under Aaron Ferguson. Sorry, you're on mute, mate.
That's a throwback to COVID there. Sorry, Tim, you're on mute. Yeah, it's a blueprint for Posh, isn't it? This whole kind of, you score 3, we'll score 4. We scored 4 in the last 5 games, at least 4 in the last 5 games, which is great, including a certain 6-1 against that small team from south of the county on Saturday. So it's we've started to turn a little bit. I know last time I came on, I was quite down and out about how we were looking. Feels like he's finally worked out his best 11. Squad depth is still going to be an issue. Inexperience is still going to be an issue. I'm not expecting great things from this season, but I'm certainly enjoying the last couple of weeks. The last month or so has been great fun to watch. We've been playing some really, really good football. Things are looking up again. So we've gone from woe is me to we're going to get promoted as champions.
Jack, Ricky J. Jones is going to get top goal scorer.
Gab, you need to stop this. So I know you and I talk quite a lot off air. This weird obsession you have with Ricky J. Jones is not healthy. I've told you, he won't notice you, Gab. It doesn't matter how much we talk about him.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm sure we'll come back to that one. But I wanted to ask Jack about Peterborough generally from an outside perspective, because, and this is how I feel about Peterborough. I think that if League One generally had panned out the way I was expecting, whereby there were lots of really strong sides that were making their resources count, I would feel like it wouldn't be enough for Peterborough to be this really good attacking side in order to get to the top 6. I think they'd have to be a better rounded side. But I don't know how you feel, Jack, from the outside. I've not been impressed by the standard of League One as I was expecting. So I think there might be a bit more room for error for Peterborough defensively, bearing in mind how swashbuckling and exciting they've been going forward.
Yeah, I think the league is really, really open, and that allows for sort of a margin to sway either way, and it allows for a team to maybe start slightly slower and pick up pace. And that's what Peterborough are looking to do. They didn't start maybe in the way that we thought they would, and it's sort of taken them a little while to get going. And maybe that is now the turning point. Consistency is obviously the biggest issue with Peterborough, and I think that seems to be the problem that we've seen. It's about gaining consistency, and then looking at the league table slightly differently. I think you're right, Gary. I think that league table is quite fascinating. They're on 21 points. We mentioned earlier about the league table. They're sat in 12th, but they're a win away. I mean, with quite a few results going their way. But let's be honest, a win and maybe a draw away from being in that top 6. And that just shows how close we are and how close this division is. So, yeah, Peterborough, again, not looking at them a lot last season, not so much this season. So looking at them now, they look really different. They look really, really different. And that's going to sound really obvious because teams watch them every single week. And I imagine a large amount of your audience in League One know far more about Peterborough. They probably watch them more than I have. But they look like statistically and looking at the numbers, there's some really, really different numbers that we did not see at Peterborough last season. And we look at their possession numbers, they were always top of the tree for possession numbers. They've conceded far more of the ball this season. The one thing that's always said to say with Peterborough is their XG. They create so many chances and they do tend to score quite a few goals. But I think the control of games has been slightly different. Peterborough have always been pretty much in control of most matches. This season, that looks slightly different.
Kwame Poku then, Tim. He scored 10 goals so far this season and laid off 5 assists. I think we can all agree that we'd have associated Kwame Poku with being a very creative player last season and an important part of your attacking machine. But I think I would have probably said the star man was Ephron Mason-Clark. This year, Kwame Poku is the star man. But are you surprised by the volume of goals that he's adding to his game this year? Because I'm not sure he was necessarily hitting those kind of numbers last year.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what you're saying. I saw you talking about Poku on TikTok actually the other day, and I completely agreed, kind of echoing what you were saying there around last year. He was that kind of waiting in the wings. This year, he's had to step up and take a main character role. And we always knew he had that ability. So I wouldn't say I'm surprised about his goal contributions. I guess the turning point for us really was whether or not he could make that step up and he could deal with that pressure. Back-to-back League One Player of the Month. He's on course to make it 3, to be honest. So, yeah, I mean, he's a star. Probably lose him in January, if not next summer. But we knew that he was the next one.
Loan back is the big
back, that's it. I just hope his move is more successful than Mason Clark's has turned out to be to Cov. But we knew that was coming. That's the posh way. It's how we fund the club. So he was the next one on the conveyor belt. He stepped up. He's increasing his value week on week. And ultimately, without him, we wouldn't be, a win and a draw away from the playoffs. We would be struggling because he's certainly carried us through, certainly through the last 6 weeks or so. The reason that we started scoring more goals is because he's found another gear and he stepped up again. And he's a really unassuming player. He's not, if you knew nothing about Peterborough United and you just watched the team, I don't think you would necessarily, in those early exchanges, pick him out as being that star player, but he just produces something out of nowhere. And he's proved to be integral. And I feel he's had to step up for the fact that we do lack a clinical goal scorer. I feel like he's filled that role well. So no, kudos to him. He's certainly paving himself a bright future.
So I mean, Ricky J. Jones, I think only 8 players in League One have scored more goals this season than Ricky J. Jones. I feel like he creates a high volume of chances for himself that allows for him to kind of miss a few because he's got that pace and strength and stamina to consistently get into those areas where you can make some allowances for maybe a little bit of wayward finishing sometimes if the outcome is only 8 players have scored more goals.
Yeah, I mean, I'll caveat this by saying that he has improved this season and he deserves credit for that because he did stagnate for a long time. He's been around the first team squad for years. It feels like the guy's like 45 with 3 mortgages, but he's still very, very young. And I think as a fan base, we forget that because he is so young and because we threw him into first team football so quickly, maybe our expectations have been unrealistic. But he is finding his feet. He's got the full backing from Darren and he knows he's that main man each week. And I think that's really helped him. Is he good enough? I still think he's League One at best. The mistake that we made with his development is we didn't loan him out maybe a couple of years ago when we should have done. We've kind of exposed him to the first team and hoped that would be enough. He's an okay League One player. What he does do is he creates opportunities for others because he's so fast. Most teams will put 1 or 2 defenders just focused on him, and that creates spaces. He makes managers' lives difficult in that respect. But our XG is that high, and the number of chances that he gets, he should be scoring more. If he's going to play as a striker, which is where we've got him now, he should be scoring more goals. I still believe his best position is out wide, where he can use that pace and cut inside, particularly on the left. But we have to trust in Darren. He's keeping him up top, and yeah, he has improved. His goal contributions have improved, but he's still an incredibly frustrating player to watch because for every goal he scores, he will miss 2 or 3 really good opportunities, and after a while, that gets really frustrating as a fan. But like I said, at the minute, everything's going great, so we love Ricky and want the best for him.
Just to finish off then, Tim, do you think Peterborough United can finish in the top 10 this season?
Probably, but echoing really what your Charlton fan said, only because the league isn't wonderful. I think we'll go on a run. January will come. We'll lose 2 or 3 players. There'll be injuries, so on and so forth. We haven't got the depth. So who knows? Mid-table is probably the best we can hope for, but you just never know with Posh. I mean, I've been supporting them decades, and I still don't know what they're going to do. They'll either go on and make a promotion push, or they'll end up fighting for relegation. You just.
I don't think you're going down personally. I think
hopefully not. No. I'm only joking. There are many worse teams in this league, like Cambridge, Northampton, etc. So yeah, it's we'll stick mid-table. We'll be happy with that.
Brilliant stuff, Tim. Thanks so much for joining us.
No worries. You're welcome.
Jack, I know you've got to shoot in a few minutes, so we'll just wrap this up. A few predictions then in terms of League One promotion. Who would be your 3 to go up if you had to pick 3 now?
I think you always just choose the shows that I'm on to this go. I think this happens every single time. I'm going to get behind. I'm going to get on the Wycombe train. To be honest, I'm really impressed by them. I think it's unfair to not put them in there, considering how good they've looked and how strong they look. I still think Birmingham have to be in there because of just how good that squad is. I think they will just come good. I think they might find a state of flow where they're struggling. I think other teams really struggle to stop them, and it sort of happens in the middle of the season. It happens when people don't really sort of realise. You sort of look at them and go, "Oh, hang on, they've sort of gone 15 games, without a defeat and won 10 of them," and you don't quite see it, and then suddenly they're off, and they look like a really strong outfit. I'm really, as much as Jake will be smirking and laughing, I genuinely think Lincoln would be my third team.
Interesting.
I think it's between. I still also got a really good feeling about Huddersfield too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then this makes for a terrible podcast. I'm going to name every team in the run, but I also still believe Stockport can't be looked past because of how good they've looked. And again, it's too early to say, Gab. To be honest, I'm really impressed by Lincoln as the outsiders, and those front two look like in a really good spot.
I think if I had to put me on the spot for three now, I would probably go Birmingham, Huddersfield, and Wycombe. There you go. Those would be my three. So I think we end up going the same, didn't we? Listen, Jack, thanks so much for joining. Had Jake Tong on mine there. Jack, thanks so much for joining us this evening. Keep up the great work on that Football League podcast now, not that League One podcast, and the Jack Ward Football podcast. Thanks to all my guests. Thanks to you for watching at home. Get subscribed to us at AFL Debate on YouTube and on Spotify because that would help us out a lot. And we'll see you again next week.